figures are used to join one scene to another. So we have a kind of a ambiguous but very effective division of the scene by the screens, which nevertheless has suggestions of continuous space. Very interesting kind of composition. Probably reproducing the at least compositional features of the original. I would tend to think there was a painting of this kind. In fact, it's quite well recorded. There was a painting of this kind by Gu Hongzhong, or at any rate from the Five Dynasties period. And this is a very beautiful Southern Sung copy of it. Then you see another seated official, two ladies leaning on him, or one standing in front of him, and the usual looks passing between them. By the way, the men are all, as you see, rather darker in complexion. The ladies are not only lighter from spending their time indoors, but also their cosmetics made up for very light or white faces, whereas the men have natural outdoor, anyway, yellow-brown faces. And then Han Chi-tsai here at the end, standing, raising his hand as if giving a kind of benediction to all this, scandalous goings-on. And then at the end, very lovely little detail, the end of the present scroll. There may have been more to it originally, according to records. A young official luring or enticing a young girl who seems rather reluctant, unclear. Give me your hand, Belinda. Anyway, enticing her into the scene, and with his arm around her. Very lovely detail. So the scroll ends. Here is the section with Han Chi-tsai, next please, with his hand raised, as I say, as if blessing the whole thing. And these two lovely women with their pale blue, green, pink robes. Wow. Very beautiful. Painting, ladies, everything beautiful. Yeah, and here is a close-up of that. Wow. One figure in a profile, the woman with her arms around or laid on his shoulders, or one on his shoulder, looking into his eyes, looking a bit austere, but obviously not reluctant. And the really, colors that are, it takes real skill to use different shades of blue and green this way and make them all work together. She has the blue figured shawl, whatever, going around her shoulders, and then under that, this sort of blue-green robe, and oh boy, yes. And then the other lady at the left with pale blue things draped over her shoulders. Next, now something completely different. It's about as different as one could get. This is, I hasten to say, not a Five Dynasties painting. It's a late Sung painting, one of two, and I'll show the other in a minute, which I'll bring back when the time comes toward the end of the course, when we're talking about Chan or Zen Buddhist painting. That's what this is. But the point is that it's attributed to an artist named Shi Ke, old attribution of Shi Ke, and Shi Ke was a Five Dynasties artist, active in his case, not in the southern Tang state, but down in Sichuan in in the southwest. And this is one of the pair of paintings titled, it represents two patriarchs of Chan or Zen Buddhism, sometimes titled Two Patriarchs Harmonizing Their Minds, or with their two patriarchs with their minds in harmony, something like that. I reproduced this one in the storybook and discussed it. Actually, they are anonymous 13th century works, and I'll bring them back as I say. Shi Ke was an artist of some eccentric habits, known for figure paintings that were so strange that they shocked people. Over in the lower left corner is an inscription purporting to be by Shi Ke himself, with a date corresponding to 919 or 967. Seems to be some question about what the date is, anyway, the purported date is. The whole thing is interpolated, of course, that is to say fake. And up above is a piece of would-be imperial writing with seals, also fake. These were added to the late Sung paintings to give them a spurious antiquity. Here's a detail of that. Well, it's done in broken brush painting, and this is a patriarch leaning on a tiger, which acts as a kind of cushion for him. A very interesting, well, satisfied-looking tiger, with rough brushwork also for the fur of the tiger, and generally done in a style which is way out of line with everything we've seen. Now, the reason I put it in here is to point out that even though we don't have anything of Shirkuh, we do know from text. The next, please. Here's the other of the pair, which we can look at as I'm talking. We do know from text of the time that there were styles of painting being used in the 5 dynasties, which were very strange and rough and spontaneous for the time. These were what are called the untrammeled styles. A critic of the time writes, I quote, "In painting, the hardest to achieve is the Iga class, that is the untrammeled." That's my rendering of E, released or untrammeled, something like that. Painting of the Iga may be clumsy in ruling off right angles and arcs. It may despise the fine grinding of colors. But even though the brushwork be simple and abbreviated, the forms are complete, and things are painted with spontaneity. End quote. So already in the late Tang, and certainly in the 5 dynasties, there were painters who would work sometimes while they were drunk, splashing the ink and the colors freely, and turning their splashes marvelously into recognizable paintings. Everybody would sort of gasp with awe when they watched them. Some of this was a kind of performance art. We can read about these, as I say, in text. Now, these were very these figured heavily in a long article by my teacher, Shimada Shujiro Shimada, whom I showed in the first lecture. And I translated this long article and published my English translation in Oriental Art magazine in 3 parts, 1961 to 64. You find it in my bibliography. Well, this was Iga, or the untrammeled style, was a development in critical theory that I'm mostly leaving out here, but I want to just talk about it briefly anyway. Besides the traditional scheme of classification, which divided artists into 3 classes, the divine at the top, the wonderful in the middle, the competent at the lower, that is Shan Miao Nang classes, Pin. Another had to be added to take in artists who didn't fit there, the Iga, or the Ipin, the untrammeled class, which included the ink splashers of the Tang and later, and others others who painted in unusual ways and couldn't be fitted into the established ranking system. For that time, back in the I was translating it in the 50s anyway, 60s, late 50s, early 60s, I had to make the point then that although we were tempted to match them up with our own abstract expressionist artists who were then flourishing, they were not really comparable. That was a wrong analogy, or the wrong comparison. What the Chinese splashers did was to produce, with their ink splashing, some semi-chance configurations, partly chance, partly made, and then turn these into recognizable pictures using brushwork after they had sobered up. In other words, it was a means of avoiding conventional man-made looking compositions, used also in Renaissance Italy. Leonardo da Vinci has a way of doing this, and so on. There's a whole article on it by Horst Jensen anyway. And at other times and places, you've had similar ways of painting with semi-random configurations. An early 19th century English watercolorist writes about this. Okay. They didn't, that is, present the ink splashes as finished paintings. They used them to make finished paintings. Anyway, I translated Shimada's article. Oh, that was a long, hard job. One of the second patriarch, because this is supposed to represent, speak in a minute, this second patriarch became a pupil of Bodhidharma, the first patriarch, Bodhidharma was in a cave refusing to see anybody. And the second patriarch, to show his great sincerity, cut off his left arm. That may be why it isn't seen here. And I told Shimada that translating this article of his into English was my equivalent of cutting off my left arm as a sign of great devotion to him. Okay. Anyway, the pictures, my colleague Jan Fontaine and Money Hickman had a very fine exhibition of Zen painting back in the 50s? Yeah, late 50s, 60s. Anyway, Boston Museum of Fine Arts, with a very fine catalog called Zen Painting and Calligraphy, still important. And Fontaine had the new theory, which I think is right, that it's not two patriarchs, but this one is called the second patriarch, harmonizing his mind. It was he would sometimes get drunk in wine shops, and was said to be harmonizing his mind by getting drunk. At any rate, that means that the first patriarch, the one we saw before with the tiger, that was another character, a monk who was famous for going around with a tiger. Well, I'll talk about these when we come to this time in the here's the next up close. We come to this at the end of the course, when we see really wild and woolly and wonderful paintings of this kind being done by Zen or Chan artists. Okay, now next please. I will put back here to remind you that already in the late Tang, it was possible for a painting like this to be done. So we did have some strange styles. This is the demon I showed in a fragment that was found in Central Asia, and can be dated to the maybe 9th century. So it's not so impossible. It gives us some idea of what really was possible. And this kind of painting must have been the kind that the critics could not fit within their normal categories, because the artist wasn't even trying to do the conventional thing. So it wasn't either, divine or wonderful or competent in the conventional sense. Okay. There also was an artist, I should say, active in Shu, in the southwest state of Shu in the Five Dynasties period, present-day Sichuan. A Chan monk painter named Guanxiu, dates 832 to 912, and there's an important series of pictures of Buddhist holy men, or arhats, in the Japanese imperial household collection attributed to him, reproduced everywhere, surrounded everybody. I'm not treating those. They're important, but for whatever reason I'm leaving them out. Now we go on. Here is a very fine painting in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, part of the same group that included a painting attributed to one of the early artists. Well, I won't go into that. But anyway, an important group of paintings that are a promised gift from a benefactor named Oscar Tong. And this is a painting, formerly C.C. Wang, titled Ladies in the Palace. And it's a copy after another, maybe Southern Song copy, after an important early composition. There's a very fine article about this by Mike Hearn, which was published in the volume called Along the Riverbank, devoted to this promised gift. And anyway, so these are pictures from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They're not my photographs. But this is an important painting, as I say, in preserving at least an old composition. And as you see, it's architecture. It's a palace, but arranged so that you're able to see into different parts of the palace, as though it's the old up equals back convention, but rearranged so that you can actually look into the rooms if they're open. And I'll show the details moving upward in that way. In the next, here's the banquet being arranged down here as a lower part, with ladies all around and servants. Palace ladies looking very much like they're out of Zhoufang paintings. That is, the style is Tang, and there may have been an old Tang painting behind it, or maybe Five Dynasties anyway. I'm sort of guessing it could be something like Five Dynasties. Then as you move upward, the woman here at the top holding something red rolled up, and a servant beside her are waiting for something to happen, somebody to come through the gate. Preparations are being made. And then up above, here, this one, you see another scene. Now,